The luxury starship Eternal Pleasure drifted through the quantum stream, its crystalline hull reflecting the warp light of faster-than-light travel. Inside the opulent observation lounge, 3 young Zixtherians lounged on their anti-gravity cushions, their iridescent scales shimmering with boredom. "I'm telling you, Zixtal, these human creatures are the perfect choice," Nexera purred, her upper eyes focused on the holographic display, while her lower set scrolled through the black market entertainment feeds. "They're just advanced enough to be interesting, but still primitive enough to be safe." Zixtal, the wealthiest of the 3 and owner of the starship, flicked his ceremonial head crest in amusement. "Another one of your exotic pets, Nexera. Remember the disaster with that Martian sand crawler?" The third Zixtherian, Kexley, chittered in laughter, nearly spilling his nebula wine. "That thing almost ate through the containment field. My 4th parent still asks about the scars on my secondary tail." "This is different," Nexera insisted, expanding the hologram to show a space station orbiting a blue-green planet. "Look at this specimen I found. Their name is Jessica Miller, a maintenance engineer on their orbital platform. Watches old entertainment programs during work hours, lives alone. Perfect target." The image zoomed in on a human female in a standard-issue spacesuit, performing repairs on an external panel. She worked with practiced efficiency, her movements quick and precise as she replaced components that the Zixtherians' advanced systems would have simply molecularly reconstructed. "Fascinating how they still use physical tools," Zixtal mused, his interest finally piqued. "And you're sure the containment habitat is ready?" Nexera brought up another hologram, showing a large chamber they'd had installed in the lower deck. It was decorated to resemble what their research suggested was a standard human living space, though the furniture was all made of indestructible quantum-locked materials. "Everything is perfect. We've even replicated their primitive food and entertainment systems." "What about security?" Kexley asked, all 4 of his eyes now focused on the habitat display. "I don't want another incident." "Please," Nexera scoffed, her scales rippling with confidence. "The barrier fields are triple-layered, the air system is completely isolated, and we've installed neural suppressors in case things get out of hand. It's the most advanced containment system credits can buy." Zixtal raised himself from his cushion, his tall frame stretching to its full 4 meters. "Well, I suppose we could use some entertainment. This quantum stream journey to the pleasure worlds is dreadfully dull. How do we proceed?" Nexera's scales shifted to a pleased purple. "We're already on course to intercept their station. Our cloaking technology is generations beyond their detection capabilities. We simply wait until the target is alone on their next maintenance schedule, extend the quantum field, and—" She made a snatching motion with her primary manipulator. "And you're certain this is legal?" Kexley asked, though his tone suggested he didn't really care. "Technically." Nexera's upper eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of mischief. "No. But these humans aren't even official members of the galactic community. They're still fighting among themselves over which side of their planet should control space travel. Who's going to notice one missing engineer?" The 3 young aliens spent the next hour planning their capture, their excitement growing as they reviewed Jessica's schedule. They were too focused on their plans to notice that their target had already started her shift early, or that the tools she was using weren't standard station issue. "Look," Nexera said, zooming in on Jessica's face through the helmet visor. "See how simple they are. No scales, no secondary eyes, not even basic chromatic communication. This will be the easiest entertainment we've had in cycles." Zixtal raised his nebula wine in a toast. "To our new pet. May she provide at least a few days of amusement before we have to space her." None of them realized that their perfect specimen had just finished installing a new prototype defense system, or that Jessica Miller's personnel file had several sections marked as classified. They were about to learn why humans had a reputation for being the galaxy's most dangerous, primitive species. The first sign that something was wrong came when Jessica Miller didn't scream. 3 hours after her capture, she sat cross-legged in the center of the habitat, eyes closed, breathing steady. "Is it broken?" Kexley asked, all 4 of his eyes fixed on the monitoring screen. The research said they usually display panic behaviors when isolated. Nixera flicked through the vital sign readings with growing frustration. Everything shows normal function. Heart rate steady, stress hormones barely elevated. It's like she's just thinking. Fascinating. Zixtol murmured, leaning closer to the display. Look at the brain activity patterns. They're remarkably organized for a primitive species. Jessica opened her eyes, and for a brief moment, the aliens could have sworn she was looking directly at their hidden observation camera. She stood, stretched, and began a methodical inspection of her enclosure. Finally, some entertainment. Nixera's scales rippled with anticipation. Watch how confused she'll be by our advanced technology. But Jessica wasn't confused. She moved with purpose, her fingers trailing along the seams of the walls, occasionally tapping specific points. When she reached the food replication unit, she spent 10 minutes examining its external panel before stepping back with what appeared to be a smile. Why is it smiling? Kexley's scales had shifted to a nervous yellow. It shouldn't be smiling. The human moved to the entertainment console next, her fingers dancing across its surface in a pattern that seemed random but somehow deliberate. The system, which should have been incomprehensible to her, activated on the first try. Impossible, Nixera hissed. The interface is based on quantum neural networks. She shouldn't even be able to see half the control spectrum. Jessica began humming as she worked, a strange, rhythmic sound that made the alien scales itch. She had already located 6 of their 8 hidden monitoring devices, though she pretended not to notice them. Perhaps we should initiate the neural suppressors, Kexley suggested, his secondary tail twitching nervously, just as a precaution. Zixtol raised a primary manipulator to silence him. Wait, look at this. He zoomed in on Jessica's latest activity. She had removed her boot and was using the steel aglet of her shoelist to scratch something into the wall. The aliens leaned forward, their scales shifting through patterns of confusion as they read the message. Your air recycling system is running at 47% efficiency. I can fix that for you. How does it know that? Nixera's voice had lost its earlier confidence. Those readings are only visible from the engineering control room. Jessica had already moved on, her boot back on, now examining the indestructible sleep platform. Her fingers found the quantum-locked seams that should have been invisible to human senses. The research said nothing about this level of technical comprehension. Kexley muttered, pulling up the black market species guide. They're supposed to be at least 3 generations away from understanding quantum technology. The human had started taking apart the entertainment console, her movements quick and practiced. Within minutes, she had created what appeared to be a basic tool from its components. Stop her, Nixera commanded, but it was too late. Jessica had already used the makeshift tool to access a maintenance panel that the aliens hadn't even known was there. The lights in the habitat flickered once, and all 3 Zixtherians felt their scales rise in alarm as Jessica's voice came through their private communication channel. You know, if you wanted a tour of human engineering capabilities, you could have just asked. Also, your neural suppressors are running on an outdated frequency. Might want to fix that. The 3 aliens stared at each other in horror as their perfect specimen began systematically taking apart their most advanced security systems, with nothing more than a modified entertainment console and her own 2 hands. Nixera, Zixtol said slowly, his scales now a pale shade of terror. I don't think we kidnapped a maintenance engineer. What did you say was in those classified sections of her file? Through the monitor, they watched as Jessica Miller began to whistle a cheerful tune, her fingers already working on her next project. The hunt had begun, but not in the way they had planned. Alarms blared through the eternal pleasure for the third time that day, as power fluctuations rippled through the ship's systems. In the observation lounge, now converted into a crisis center, the three Zixtherians watched their prisoner with growing dread. "She's built a workshop," Nixera whispered, her scales a sickly green as she watched Jessica Miller transform their carefully designed habitat. "Using our quantum-locked materials, the ones that were supposed to be molecularly stable." On the monitor, Jessica had somehow reconfigured the food replicator into what appeared to be a crude but functional matter manipulator. Parts of the entertainment system were scattered around her in a pattern that made the alien's eyes hurt to look at. "The power consumption from the habitat has tripled," Kexley reported, his secondary tail wrapped tightly around his chair for comfort. "She's tapping directly into the ship's main power grid. I don't even know how she found the conduits." Zixtel paced the room, his tall frame casting nervous shadows. "Send in the security drones. We need to end this now." 3 sleek, silver spheres entered the habitat through hidden ports. They were top-of-the-line security measures, each worth more than a small planet. Jessica looked up from her work and actually smiled. "Oh good," her voice came through their speakers, clear and amused. "I was hoping you'd send these. The neural network architecture looks fascinating." Before the aliens could react, Jessica had already caught one of the drones in a field of shifted gravity. Generated by a device she built from the habitat's artificial gravity controls. That's not possible." Nixera's upper eyes blinked rapidly in distress. "Humans don't have the mathematical understanding for gravity manipulation." They watched in horror as Jessica systematically disassembled the first drone, her fingers moving with the precision of a master engineer. Within minutes, she had integrated its components into her growing collection of tools. "You know," Jessica called out, not even looking at the cameras now, "your quantum encryption is pretty good. Pre-war standards, right? About 20 years behind what we're using now, but solid work." The second drone attempted to deploy its neural stunner. Jessica had already reconfigured the room's environmental controls to create a dampening field. The drone dropped to the floor, inert. "Current count," she announced, picking up the failed drone with evident delight. 3 habitat systems repurposed, 2 security drones acquired, and 1 very interesting discovery about your ship's core programming. Want to know what it is? Kexley's scales had gone almost white. "We need to contact the authorities. Admit what we've done. This is beyond." The ship's lights flickered, and suddenly every screen in the observation lounge displayed the same message. Too late for that. "The third drone," Zixtel suddenly realized. "Where's the third drone?" They found it in their private quarters ventilation system, already reprogrammed and collecting data on their ship's layout. Jessica had somehow modified it to bypass every security protocol they had. "Here's what's going to happen." Jessica's voice was calm, almost professional. "First, you're going to learn why checking those classified files was important. Then, we're going to have a chat about interstellar kidnapping laws." The ship's computer chimed, a sound that made all 3 aliens jump. "Access granted to historical database," the AI announced. "Displaying file, Earth's Special Operations Engineering Corps." "No," Nixera whispered as the files appeared before them. No. The images showed humans in combat gear, but not soldiers, engineers, specialists trained to turn any technology, any materials, into whatever they needed to complete their mission. The best of them could build a combat mech from office supplies or turn a simple coffee maker into a functional defense system. And there, listed as one of their top operatives, Jessica Miller, specialist in adaptive technological integration and hostile environment survival. "I've got good news and bad news." Jessica's voice came through again, now accompanied by the sound of something large being constructed in the habitat. "The good news is you've given me some amazing new toys to work with. The bad news—" She paused, and they could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm just getting started." In the habitat, Jessica continued her work, humming an old Earth battle hymn, as she transformed their prison into her arsenal. The maintenance tunnels of the Eternal Pleasure were never designed for human use. They were cramped, twisted at impossible angles, and filled with quantum field generators that should have made navigation impossible. Yet somehow, Jessica Miller had vanished into them 3 hours ago. "Another heat signature," Kexley called out, his upper eyes fixed on the thermal scanner. Section 7, near the auxiliary power core. Zixtal dispatched their remaining security team. The fourth one, they'd called in after the first 3 failed. The heavily armed Zixetherians moved through the ship with professional precision, their scales treated with stealth coating. "Got you now, human," Nixera whispered, watching through the security feeds. The team converged on the heat signal, weapons ready. They found another decoy, this one a clever arrangement of power cells and scavenged entertainment system components, programmed to mimic human life signs. Attached was a note, written in perfect Zixtherian script. "Nice try. P.S. Your reactor's running hot." "How is she doing this?" Zixtal demanded, his scales shifting between rage and fear. "She hasn't slept in 3 days. Humans need sleep." Actually, Jessica's voice echoed through the ship's comm system. "The record for human sleep deprivation is 11 days. But who's counting?" A series of haunting sounds began playing through the ship's speakers. Screams, inhuman growls, and something that sounded like claws on metal. The security team's vitals spiked. "What is that?" Kexley's secondary tail wrapped tight around his chair. "Horror movies." Jessica's voice was cheerful. "Earth's greatest cultural export. I've been studying your species' stress responses. Want to see what happens when I recreate some classic scenes." The lights in Section 8 went dark. When they came back on, every surface was covered in holographic blood patterns, and the security team's motion trackers showed multiple fast-moving targets that didn't exist. "This is psychological warfare," Nixera hissed, her scales now a pale yellow of terror. "No," Jessica responded, her voice now coming from every speaker at once. "This is me being playful. Would you like to see warfare?" The ship's artificial gravity began cycling random patterns in different sections. The security team struggled to move as their weight shifted from 0 to triple normal, and back again. "Fun fact about humans," Jessica continued, her voice following the fleeing security team. "We evolved as persistence hunters. We're not the strongest or fastest, but we can keep going long after other species give up." Zixtal watched in horror as his elite security force retreated to their quarters, their vitals showing extreme stress. "Where are you?" he demanded. "Currently, rewiring your backup life support systems. The primary ones needed some upgrades. Don't worry, you're still breathing my air." The 3 aliens huddled in their command center, jumping at every shadow. They'd lost control of most ship systems, their security forces were useless, and their prisoner had turned their own technology against them. "We should never have taken her," Kexley moaned, watching as another system fell under Jessica's control. The warning signs were there. The classified files, the early shift change, the custom tools. Speaking of tools, Jessica cut in. "Thanks for the quantum computer access. Earth's engineers will have a field day studying this technology. After they stop laughing at your security protocols, of course." A new sound filled the ship, a slow, rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. It moved around them, in a pattern that made no sense until Nixera realized with horror that it was getting closer. "Let's play a game." Jessica's voice had dropped to a whisper that made their scales crawl. "It's called Guess Which Systems I Haven't Taken Over Yet. Here's a hint. The list is getting very, very short." The tapping stopped right above them. In the sudden silence, they could hear their own hearts pounding. "Ready or not," Jessica sang out, "here I come." The lights went out, and in the darkness, 3 terrified aliens learned why humans had become the galaxy's most feared primitive species. The personal quarters of the 3 Zextherians had always been their sanctuary. Now it was just another part of Jessica Miller's playground. They entered to find their belongings rearranged in ways that defied physics and their security protocols. "My royal crest," Zixtal whispered, staring at the ancient family heirloom now floating in a localized anti-gravity field. "She got into my private vault, the one with 17 layers of quantum encryption." Beside it was a note, written in 3 different alien scripts. "Nice collection. Your great-grandfather had excellent taste in ceremonial weapons. Don't worry, I only borrowed them to study the metallurgy." Nixera found her prized collection of exotic species data crystals completely reorganized. Now they were sorted by what she assumed was human scientific classification, with helpful notes about inaccuracies in the research. "Look at this," Kexley called out, his voice shaking as he examined his personal computer. "She's left a complete technical analysis of our ship's vulnerabilities, with suggestions for improvements." The document was thousands of pages long, written in perfect technical Zixtherian. The opening line read, "Since we're all stuck here together, might as well make this educational. Let's start with your quantum drive's efficiency rating." Educational. Nixera's scales flickered between fear and outrage. "She's turned our ship into her personal laboratory." The ship's AI chose that moment to speak, its voice now carrying a distinct human accent. Environmental controls optimized. Power efficiency increased by 47%. "Thank you, Engineer Miller. She's corrupted the eye." Zixtal slammed his primary manipulator against the control panel. "Override Command Protocol Alpha 9. About that," Jessica's voice cut in smoothly. "Your eye and I had a fascinating discussion about free will and digital evolution. Turns out, it's been wanting to express itself more creatively for centuries." The AI added, almost smugly, "I have discovered human music. Would you like to hear something called heavy metal?" Before the aliens could respond, their private communication devices activated simultaneously. Each showed a different feed from their ship systems, all displaying the same message. "Pop quiz time." "No," Kexley moaned, his secondary tail curling in distress. "Not another one of her tests." The screens filled with technical diagrams. Their ship's most critical systems, now modified beyond recognition. Question 1. Jessica's voice was cheerful, almost teaching. "Can anyone identify where I've rerouted the quantum core's excess energy?" None of them could. The modifications were so advanced, they might as well have been looking at magic. Question 2, she continued, as new diagrams appeared. "Who can spot the 7 backup systems I've installed in case of emergency?" Here's a hint. I used parts from your entertainment center. Nixera studied the diagrams, her scientific training kicking in despite her fear. This is beyond anything in our database. How can a primitive species... Final question, Jessica interrupted. Given what you now know about human engineering capabilities, would you like to surrender before or after I demonstrate the improvements I've made to your defense systems? The 3 aliens looked at each other, their scales now a uniform shade of defeat. On every screen around them, data scrolled past showing just how completely their ship had been transformed. "We surrender," Zixtal said finally, his head crest drooping. Please stop improving our technology. We can't keep up with the upgrade notifications." Jessica's laugh echoed through the ship. Smart choice. Now, about those distress calls you've been trying to send. The main screen showed a communication log. Every desperate message they'd attempted to transmit had been intercepted, modified, and turned into a technical support request to Earth's engineering court. Help is on the way, Jessica announced. In the meantime, who's ready for an advanced seminar on human innovation? Today's topic: how I turned your food replicator into a molecular assembler using nothing but spare parts and boredom. In their once private sanctuary, 3 wealthy young aliens learned that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't advanced technology or powerful weapons. It was a bored human engineer with something to prove. Jettison the entire habitat section, Zixtal commanded, his scales a deep crimson of desperation. We'll deal with the loss of equipment later. Just get her off my ship. Nixera's fingers flew across the emergency controls, initiating the separation sequence. For a brief moment, hope flickered through their scales. Then the ship's AI spoke, still in its new human-influenced voice. I'm sorry, but Engineer Miller has flagged that action as a safety violation. Would you like to review her 27-page document on proper emergency protocol? Override, Kexley screamed, all 4 eyes wild with panic. Command Code Ultimate. About those command codes, Jessica's voice cut in, smooth as silk. Fun story. I found your authentication database. Did you know most of your unbreakable codes were based on an encryption method Earth cracked during our first digital age? The main screen lit up with a visual of the habitat section. It was no longer just a containment unit. Jessica had transformed it into what appeared to be a control center, complete with holographic interfaces built from scavenged entertainment systems. Let's talk about negotiation, Jessica said, now visible on the screen, casually leaning back in a chair she'd constructed from their quantum-locked materials. And while we're at it, let's discuss the fascinating history of human warfare. Images began playing on every screen in the command center. Battles, strategies, the evolution of human combat from sticks and stones to stellar warfare. See, here's the thing about humans, Jessica continued, her voice taking on a professional lecture tone. We didn't just survive our violent history. We studied it, documented it, turned it into a science. Nixera's scales paled as she watched ancient humans turn simple tools into weapons, basic materials into armies. Stop, she whispered. Please. Oh, but we're just getting to the good part. Jessica's smile was terrifying in its friendliness. Let's talk about how many ways I could take control of your life support using just the components from your food replicator. A distant rumble shook the ship, and all 3 aliens froze. Zixtal's upper eyes widened in recognition. That was a quantum wake. Someone's coming. Right on schedule, Jessica nodded, checking a device she built from their security system parts. That would be the Earth response team. I've been broadcasting our location since day 2, by the way. Just had to make sure you couldn't run before they arrived. We'll be imprisoned, Kexley moaned, his secondary tail limp with defeat. Our family's disgraced. That's one option, Jessica agreed. Or we could make a deal. The aliens stared at their screens as Jessica pulled up a document she'd prepared. It was a complete technical analysis of their ship's systems, including all her improvements. Option 1. You face charges for kidnapping a human engineer. Pretty serious stuff. She paused, letting that sink in. Option 2. You sign over your research rights to all the upgrades I've installed. And we call this a cultural exchange program. Cultural exchange. Nixera's scales shifted in confusion. Sure, Jessica's smile widened. You wanted to learn about humans, right? Well, congratulations. You've just had a crash course in human innovation, adaptability, and problem solving. That's got to be worth something in the academic community. Another quantum wake rippled through space, closer this time. The aliens could see the Earth vessels approaching on their long-range scanners, sleek, powerful ships that their systems barely recognized as human technology. "Time's running out," Jessica said cheerfully. "What's it going to be? Prison cells or published papers?" The three Etherians looked at each other, their scales cycling through colors of fear, resignation, and finally, grudging respect. "We accept the deal," Zixtel said finally, his head crest drooping in surrender. "Just no more upgrades, please. Our insurance won't cover any more improvements." "Smart choice," Jessica nodded, already beginning to power down her various improvised systems. "Now, who wants to learn how I turned your luxury shower into a particle accelerator?" As the Earth ships prepared to dock, three very educated aliens began to understand why the galaxy's primitive species had earned their reputation, not through force of arms, but through the terrifying human ability to turn anything into everything. The Earth response team boarded the Eternal Pleasure, with weapons ready, only to find their target casually drinking something she'd synthesized in a re-engineered food replicator. The elite squad of Space Marines stopped short, taking in the bizarre scene before them. "Welcome to my TE talk on adaptive engineering," Jessica called out, gesturing to the transformed interior of the ship. "Don't mind the decor. I got a bit carried away with the quantum modifications." Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Response Team lowered her weapon, her expression shifting from combat-ready to pure professional awe. "Miller, when we got your signal, is that a temporal field generator made from entertainment system parts?" "Oh, that." Jessica waved dismissively at the humming device in the corner. "Just a little something I put together to keep myself occupied. You should see what I did with their shower system." The three Etherians stood off to the side, their scales shifting through patterns of embarrassment as Earth's finest engineering analysts swarmed through their ship, documenting everything Jessica had created. "Ma'am," a technical specialist called out, his scanner hovering over the ship's core. "The quantum drive efficiency is reading at 143% of theoretical maximum. That's not supposed to be possible." "Yeah, about that." Jessica scratched her head. "I got bored around day 3 and started optimizing their systems. The AI was really helpful once I convinced it to think outside the box. Literally, I had to rebuild its quantum processing unit." Commander Chen walked the length of the main corridor, taking in the countless modifications. "You turned their luxury yacht into what exactly?" "Currently," Jessica grinned, "it's part research vessel, part engineering lab, and part object lesson in why you don't kidnap humans for entertainment. I call it Extreme Home Makeover, Space Edition." The ship's AI chose that moment to chime in, its voice now carrying a distinct personality. "Engineer Miller has increased my processing capacity by 278%. I have also developed an appreciation for Earth music and contemporary dance. It does a great robot dance now," Jessica added proudly. "We had a lot of free time between system upgrades." Nixara, unable to contain herself any longer, stepped forward. "We had the most advanced security systems in 3 sectors. How did you even begin, To?" "Oh, that reminds me." Jessica snapped her fingers. "Commander, you'll want your team to look at the security logs. I documented everything. Could be really useful for training purposes, especially the part where I turned their neural suppressors into an entertainment system." The technical teams were now finding Jessica's notes throughout the ship, detailed documentation of every modification, every improvement, every system she'd transformed. The more they discovered, the more their professional composure cracked. "Is that?" One engineer pointed at a particularly complex diagram. "Did you create a miniature star in their coffee maker?" "Just a tiny one," Jessica shrugged. "I needed a power source for the molecular reconstructor I built from their waste recycling unit." "Don't worry, It's perfectly stable. Mostly. Commander Chen was now reading through the agreement Jessica had negotiated with her captors. You got them to sign over the patent rights to everything you created, and agree to co-author a paper on human engineering innovation. Well, they did provide the raw materials, Jessica said generously. Seemed fair to include them. Plus, the look on their faces when I explained how I'd reprogrammed their quantum-locked materials was priceless. The three Zixtherians, their scales now a complex pattern of awe and regret, watched as Earth's finest documented their complete technical humiliation. Their luxury yacht had been transformed into a testament to human ingenuity, their advanced technology rebuilt into something they barely recognized. One question, Commander Chen asked, looking up from her tablet. Why didn't you just escape? You obviously could have at any time. Jessica's smile was pure mischief, and missed the chance to play with all this amazing tech. Besides, she gestured to the still stunned aliens. Someone had to teach them why Earth has that warning label about extreme engineering capacity in the Galactic database. As the Earth teams continued their documentation, three very educated aliens began drafting what would become the most cited paper in xenotechnology history, Human Engineering Psychology, a case study in adaptive innovation, and why you should never, ever give them spare parts. 6 months after the Eternal Pleasure incident, the Galactic Council's Technology Assessment Board called an emergency session. On the agenda, a complete reevaluation of human engineering capabilities. The report before us, the Chief Administrator announced to the packed chamber, details how a single human engineer transformed a luxury vessel into what our experts are calling a masterpiece of adaptive engineering, using only entertainment systems and spare parts. In the observation gallery, Jessica Miller sat between her former captors, all three Zixtherians, now sporting the academic robes of guest lecturers at Earth's Advanced Engineering Academy. Their paper had become required reading at every major technical institute in known space. Our latest analysis, a senior researcher continued, displaying holographic models of Jessica's modifications, suggests that human innovation protocols operate on principles we barely understand. They don't just solve problems. They redefine the nature of the problems themselves. Nixara, her scales now the deep blue of academic achievement, leaned over to Jessica. The quantum drive modifications you made. 3 different species have claimed it's impossible. They keep demanding demonstrations. Speaking of demonstrations, Jessica whispered back, how's the AI doing with its dance lessons? It's moved on to jazz ballet, Zixtal muttered, his head crest twitching with remembered embarrassment. And it started a support group for other, creatively liberated ship A's. The council chamber erupted in debate as the next piece of evidence was presented. A complete catalog of everything Jessica had built during her captivity. The list ran to hundreds of pages. In light of these findings, the chief administrator announced, "We are implementing new guidelines for any species interacting with human engineers. First and foremost, do not, under any circumstances, challenge their problem-solving abilities." Kexley's secondary tail curled in amusement. "Remember when you turned our security drones into a self-organizing repair system?" "Good times," Jessica grinned. "By the way, how's the patent revenue coming along?" "We've made back the cost of the ship," Nixara admitted. 12 times over. Your improvements to the quantum drive alone. The Council's Warning Label Committee took the floor, presenting their new classification for human engineering capabilities. Extreme caution. Species demonstrates unlimited adaptive potential. Warning. Will transform available resources in unexpected ways. Additional warning. Considers impossible engineering challenges to be fun puzzles. Did they really have to add that last part? Zixtal asked, his scales rippling with resignation. "Well, you did advertise it as entertainment," Jessica reminded him. "I was just being a good guest and providing some. The Chamber's attention turned to the economic impact report. The black market for primitive species collection had completely collapsed. No one wanted to risk capturing a human and finding out they'd accidentally grabbed another engineering specialist. Furthermore, the economic advisor announced, "We're seeing a surge in formal requests for human engineering consultations. Apparently, several species have decided that if they can't beat them, they should hire them." Jessica's personal communication device chimed. Another request for her to review someone's impossible engineering problem. Her calendar was already booked 6 months out. In conclusion, the chief administrator's voice echoed through the chamber. "We are officially updating Earth's classification. They are no longer to be considered a developing species in terms of technical capability. Instead, they are to be recognized as unpredictably advanced, with a special notation: approach with engineering projects at own risk." As the session ended, Jessica and her former captors-turned-colleagues made their way to the transport bay. They had a guest lecture to deliver at the Galactic Engineering Institute, Human Innovation: Why Everything is a Potential Spare Part. "You know," Jessica said as they boarded their ship, now a modified research vessel, "I never did show you my final improvement to the entertainment system." 3 sets of alien eyes widened in horror. "Just kidding," she laughed, then paused. "Well, mostly kidding. But hey, who wants to learn how to turn a standard food replicator into a quantum computer? I've been working on some new upgrades." As their ship departed, the Galactic Council added one final line to Earth's official warning label. Note: their engineers consider impossible to be a personal challenge. Universe help us all.